So as a modern woman working, I think the biggest struggle I find is still the expectation, especially as a working mum, to carry the weight of, you know, that mental load of what's everyone having for dinner? Have I remembered Uncle Joe's birthday? You know, oh, and hold on, I've got to get a board report ready as well. So I find that that's still disappointingly a struggle that I find that as modern women in a business world that we still face.
I don't know if this is a challenge, but I find that particularly being in the sales sector, you get undermined or underestimated. But I kind of like it now. It's like a little surprise I get to throw in. People sort of just don't expect you to really go in there and be able to solve things. I still face a little bit of that.
For me, it's more about the environment, and more so because I have been born and raised in India and then coming here to New Zealand. I feel like depending on, like, you know, in Rome, do as the Romans do. So when I am in India, I am a certain way, and as a modern woman, and when I'm in New Zealand, I'm a certain way as a modern woman. Like for me at home, most of my household chores is where my husband takes care of, so I don't have to worry about that. But had I been in India, it would have been completely opposite, and I still would have to kind of act as if I am actually take on those responsibilities, which I don't here in New Zealand. Whereas here, I just can be myself.
There's that cultural overlay on top of everything. Wow.
Yep.
It's always been a challenge to have all of those extra responsibilities on top of just my work or my career or whatever else that I want to pay attention to. And in Romania, I still very much old-fashioned in a way. You always think of the woman just as doing the house chores and of the man as being the breadwinner. But I find that that's not really the case in New Zealand, or at least definitely not as much.
I came from banking and finance, and when I was a grad and I worked for a partner, I have this memory, and I was doing a bunch of work for him, and I'd been working for this customer a lot, and then it was time to go out and meet the customer and have lunch and kind of work through some stuff. And he said to me, he's like, "I'm not going to take you because you're a woman and it won't work." And I was so shocked. Like, I couldn't believe it. And I left banking a year or two later, so like I can't tell you very much if like that's changed, but I do feel that at first AML it's not like that, which I feel lucky about, and I'm angry that I feel lucky about it.
Yeah, coming out as a grad, I definitely got asked to take the notes. In hindsight, I don't know if it was because I was, you know, bottom of the pecking order, or if it was because I was a woman, but I think in marketing especially, there's always a lot of women. So I think we are probably luckier because there's women leading women, and it's a different environment than if it was a male dominated area of the business.
Before I was here, I was working in like advertising and PR, and like I have a history of endometriosis, and I had a flare up, and I wanted to go. I was aware it was going to be a long process, and I didn't feel comfortable asking for the time off to go to the various appointments, because it wasn't like an environment where I felt I could just be like to my boss, "Hey, like I've got these various appointments, I need this time off." And it was just such a hectic time of year that I just kind of waited it out until after, and stress exacerbates that, like the symptoms. So that was not a very good time, but it was just, I just did not feel comfortable saying, "Hey, look, I've got this like chronic disease. I can't be working right now." It just wasn't an environment that allowed for that.
I don't know if this is just me, but I find that if I'm going into the office or if I have an important meeting, I want to put makeup on and put certain clothes on, not to look good, but to look older and more like so that men like respect you more.
Have you guys noticed that since the pandemic, like there's not as much expectation to be looking perfect, and you can just show up as you are and be your actual self?
Definitely. I find there's been a sort of relatability because we're all going through this together. And so, you know, I have little jokes about people saying I'm wearing a shirt at the top and pajamas at the bottom. So yeah, definitely I found that's softened that a little bit.
I think when I first started working in tech, which was about 4 years ago, I was on a floor with about 100 employees, and there were about 4 women on that floor. It was mostly like software developers, and I was a content curator. And I think nowadays that's definitely shifted and increased, even in that like short time period. But I just remember looking around and just being like, wow, like in eyesight, I'm the only like woman that was around.
Yeah.
I mean, mostly when it comes to development team, it's mostly male, and there are very few women who actually do development. But what I've noticed is, like teaching, for example, it used to be, say, when women didn't work, it used to be a male dominated, and now you see like more women. Take nursing as an example. What I notice is not so much in engineering space, but in product space, you do have a lot of women who are now taking on product manager roles. To me, I feel that, I mean, obviously the goal is to see a lot of women in this space, because to be honest, when it comes to any other industry or any other roles, tech definitely pays much more higher. Right? For me, I used to be in a customer facing role before. Used to work double and get paid like half, and that just changed for me, when I came into the product space. That is why I don't know. Yeah, but obviously my goal is to make sure like people do understand this and see this as a path for growth. But another thing, although I am in the tech space, where it's the collective consciousness about hiring women and diversity is much more as compared to the other industries, but still like being career driven, I still have things in mind. So say if I want to start a family and things like that, I still feel, oh, is that going to be a step back in my career? And if I've just joined the company now, so I'm like, oh, in the first year itself, is it a good time to get pregnant, even when I have not proved myself in the company? So those, despite being like however modern we are, I'm sure like there are times when these questions do come up in your mind. And yeah, that is why an environment where you're just not safe, but you feel confident in your skin, as well as that you're proving yourself, is like so important to us, especially because these other decisions rely on these things as well.
That's a really good point, right? Because that's always a decision that's in the back of our minds if we choose to have children, is that the impact is going to be overly onerous on us as females, not never males, which is it's really sad.
I've had all sorts of roles, from working in corporate to real estate to now here in tech for the first time. And I have to say, it's the first time where my gender just isn't even a thing for me. I don't even know what our ratio is. I just know that when I walk into the office, there seems to be an equal blend of men and women. And I've never been put in a position where I feel like my gender has put me in a weaker position than my male peers. So that's how I feel. I haven't even thought about it up until this moment, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, I agree entirely. Like it's not a factor in anything that happens. Like I've moved up in the company, and it's never been like, oh, maybe I won't get this role. Like it hasn't occurred to me that my gender is even like a factor in the way I work, which is pretty fantastic, actually.
I love that there are so many women in this company, especially like in leadership positions, who like really care about other women and are like creating space for people to grow and take new opportunities and try stuff they've never done before. There's a real kind of mentality at First AML where it's just like there's more problems than we have people. You just like throw something at somebody and they give it their best shot, and nobody's ever sitting next to you second guessing you or like wondering if you're actually capable of something. There's everyone believes in each other.
Yeah,
definitely with the problems and the fires, everyone just kind of has a go at something, and no one's ever like that critical of anything you do. So you feel quite confident and like you trust your abilities to try something.
Yeah.
I've been in a space where I was in logistics, and I was the only or one or two women on the shop floor because we were external visitors. But in a manufacturing space, you will not find a woman on the shop floor. And there were no toilets as well at all for women in that shop floor. So we had to walk all the way to the main office for the washroom. But that too now here, I mean, like some of us mentioned, I don't have to think about, these sort of things, and can just focus on like my work and getting better at my skills. I that is why I think I would want to stay in this sector as well as like first AML as well, where we are at the stage where we are not just talking about women in general, but overall diversity, how we can, make it inclusive for not just singular cultures, but, people of all genders and all of that. So some of the companies that I have worked, we have not even had this sort of discussion. So we are definitely on the right path.
I was just going to say, I agree with it not being a factor. Like, until these conversations happen, you kind of just go along and you don't feel like you're a different gender to anyone else you're talking to in the company, because it's all inclusive.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think everyone's said it in some way or another, is that one of the things we like about First ML as females is that there is that space. It is a safe space to be who we are as we are. There's no need to act super alpha, as I've seen in other industries or other, male-dominated industries as well. And that then ties into the really positive culture and environment that we have. So nobody's trying to outperform anyone else, which is amazing. So
I think I would go with my grandmother, who has since passed away. She was one of the first women in New Zealand to go to university and study science, zoology, back in, I think it was the 1930s. And back then, a woman studying
trailblazer.
It was unheard of. And my grandfather wasn't the one who went to university. So it was just, but it was kind of, in New Zealand, it was a bit odd, definitely, but it wasn't as much of a problem as it was across the globe. And the fact that almost 100 years on, we're still kind of fighting the same fight, but the progress we've made since is like really quite cool to see. So I'd love to like have a chat with her and see what she thought of the world now as it is, and what the kind of developments she could have made. Because if she was that, fearless back then, it'd be incredible to see what she'd be like, would have been like in this generation.
Do you know who I think is really cool is another Kiwi, is Michelle Dickinson. And she's nano girl, and her goal is getting women and girls interested in STEM and technology and stuff. And I think what she does is really cool.
I'd like to talk to Serena Williams. She's obviously the greatest tennis player ever, but she often doesn't get regarded as that because they only think of the males. And there's one interview that Andy Murray had, I think it was Andy Murray, about, and a journalist asked him, like, how does it feel to be close to getting like the most Grand Slams or something like that, the closest person, and he was like, the closest male, actually, not the closest female. So I'd just love to chat to her and figure out what it's like to be a female sportswoman, because a lot of female sportswomen don't get as much recognition as their male counterparts. And also, she won a Grand Slam previously.
My go-to person, I think I wrote an essay about her in high school. And ever since, every time I get questions like this, I just go straight to her. Just Simone de Beauvoir. She's the author of The Second Sex. So yeah, she's also a trailblazer. What I really admire about her, and the reason why I'd like to have dinner with her, is just because she had the courage to speak up in a time when you couldn't really speak up. But also she used to hang around in this philosopher's circle, which I thought was very cool.
I admire a lot of women who are ahead of their times, because it takes a lot of guts to stand up for yourself. But I do admire Angela Merkel. She is a really clean politician, which I really admire about her. In today's day and time, it's just so hard to find someone with that sort of track record, and she's testimony to that. Actually, there's this woman who I particularly don't admire, but I would like to go and ask her, and that's like, this was from the show Mrs. America, and the name of the woman is Phyllis Schlafly. So during her time, she was the one who was against like women being into the workforce. And yeah, I want to bring her like in today's day and ask her like, what does she think of the women who can work and manage family today? And has her opinion changed on whether women should have the right to decide whether to have their babies or not? Because I mean, the woman is the woman's biggest enemy. Have you heard of that?
Totally.
That didn't go down too well with me as to why she did what she did. So yeah, I want to ask her those questions.
I think one of the early queens, historic, like the Queen of Scots or something like that. I just think, like, to hold a leadership role like that when you're constantly being undermined and people are literally going to assassinate you because they don't think you're worthy of being on the throne. Yeah, I'd love to have a chat with one of those ladies and just pick their brain on how they managed to stay so strong and calm and hold those roles for so long.